Welcome to our Buy the Book channel. I'm absolutely delighted today to have the best-selling author join me, Sheila O'Flanagan, who is currently number 2 in the Irish charts with her new novel, which is 3 Weddings and a Proposal. So welcome, Sheila. You might just introduce yourself.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you for having me. Yes, my name is Sheila O'Flanagan, and I have been a published author now since 1997, and I've written about between short stories and a couple of books for children, and my novels I've written about 30 books, and most of them, fortunately for me, have sold pretty well, and I'm now published in about 25 different languages.
Wow.
And yeah, and since the year 2000, I have been full-time writer.
Full time, yeah. So we might actually go back to that transition period because I did listen to one of your recent interviews on a podcast, and I suppose you were you started off your career as a banker or in the financial services sector.
Well, in banking, yeah.
In
I
banking, yeah.
actually, my first job was in the central bank, and then I moved around a little bit within banking. And you know, as I said in that interview, banking was not my first choice of anything to do. I mean, it certainly
Mm-hmm.
wasn't my dream. I didn't wake up every day saying, "Gosh, I want to be a banker."
Mm.
But it was a job,
Yeah.
and when I got into it, I enjoyed certain aspects of it, certainly, and I kind of wanted to do well in it. So I just worked hard at it. But having said that, at the same time, writing was the background thing that I wanted to do, and I would write when I would come home. I'd read, and I would write for a release and for my own enjoyment, and
Mm-hmm.
so writing was still always part of me.
Mm. Yeah, I know it's because when I was listening to that interview, it was incredible that you were very, you're saying that writing was very much a hobby, like it wasn't really on your radar, in the sense of a career. And I suppose there was a transition for you, over from that banking career. Even I suppose when you had your first novel, it didn't kind of happen overnight that you became a full-time writer. So you might just kind of talk us then to the stage where you actually got your first one published. How did that kind of
Yeah,
come
well,
about? And
I think obviously, when we're looking back now into the late 1990s, the publishing scene and pathways into publishing were quite different to how they are now, because really back then there wasn't the same level of social community around publishing, and there certainly weren't blogs. The internet was not a big thing, so
Mhm.
it was all very much a traditional route towards publishing, and that was that's what any writer looked towards if you wanted to get published. And I had, before that, I'd written some very short pieces that got published in papers, and I just sent them in, on spec, and a few pieces in magazines and things like that. So from that aspect of it, that was there was no other way other than to say, "Oh, I've written a book, and what am I going to do? I have to send it to a publisher." I mean,
Mhm.
that was it. And so that's what I did. And I actually sent it to 2 publishers in Ireland, and I made what is a rookie mistake, I will tell you now, in
Mhm.
terms of one of the publishers, because like my books are a particular type of book, and they didn't do that kind of book. And I thought, well, people like Maeve Binchy and Patricia Scanlon are doing quite well, and maybe you'd be interested in doing this too. And they said, "Don't be stupid. We don't publish these books, and we know nothing about it." And I
Mhm.
think that was a really interesting lesson, actually,
Mhm.
which was that, you think to yourself, well, everybody must be interested in a type of book, but they're not.
Mm.
And so if you send your book, if you're looking down that traditional route, and you send your book to a publisher and they reject it, it could well be simply that it's not the book that they want to publish. It's not
Mhm.
nothing against your book. It's simply
Yeah.
that they don't have the expertise in that. And I think it's really important to know that not all publishers have the expertise in all sorts of books. That's an important thing
Mm. No,
to know.
that's definitely a good piece of advice, is in because it can be very hard not to take it personally, a rejection.
Yeah, it is. Of course, you take a person got so much of your, even if they say it's only business. Like, but I always think the worst thing to say to somebody is don't take it personally because you always do.
Yeah.
And or somebody saying it's only business. Well,
Uh-huh.
business is also a personal thing, so of course you take it personally. But I actually didn't take that personally because I realized that I was being very stupid. And then I sent it to another publisher who did publish a variety of books. And in fact, what they said to me was, the book that you've written is too young for us, but we like your writing. And if you're thinking about writing older characters, we might be interested. And would you think about doing that? And I said, yeah, I would think about doing that. Of course I would, because even though nobody's committing necessarily to publishing your book, obviously it's an encouraging sign when they tell you we might be interested.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at my characters and looked at the book I'd written, which now I think might have been published as a young adult book, but young adult fiction was not a big thing back in the late 90s either. So I looked at the characters, and they were all sort of in their late teens and moving into their early 20s. And I added 15 years to their lives, and I thought about what might have happened to them in that intervening period, and I thought about what might happen to them in the future. And I wrote my first book, which was Dreaming of a Stranger, based around that. And actually the structure of Dreaming of a Stranger, which goes over quite a few years, was based on the structure of the first book, that the sort of young adult book that I'd written.
They were just older.
They were just older. Yeah,
Just
that's
older.
all that happened. They just got a
Yeah,
bit older.
yeah. No, I think because I think in that, when you were mentioning that as well, you said, look, the opportunity was there and you weren't going to say no. You were going to say, look, I can adapt this. And I think that was a good decision, because that book then was a bestseller. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
well, it was.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was.
yeah.
And yes, I would absolutely say that to anybody. And it was one of the things that really I learned in working in finance, that if somebody offers you an opportunity, and no matter how nervous you are, how doubtful you are, or how lacking in self-confidence you might be about it, if somebody offers you an opportunity, especially to do something you really want to do, you absolutely have to say yes. Because if you don't say yes, then they forget about you and they move on to the next person, and somebody else has your opportunity. So so when they asked me, yeah, would you consider doing it? Of course, I said yes. And even though I wasn't sure, of course I wasn't sure myself whether I would be able to do the book, whether I would be able to think the right storyline for these characters. But you have to, at some point, you have to back yourself.
You do, yeah. No, that's such good advice, and I think it's sort of one of those things as well, that you don't know when it's going to come back, an opportunity, to you. So you just really have to go with it, and then if it doesn't work out, at least you gave it a go.
Well, exactly. It's like, what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't work out. Well, at least you won't be sitting there saying, oh, maybe I should have done this, or I should have done that, or seeing somebody else with a book deal that maybe you could have gotten,
Yeah, no, exactly. And I find it incredible, actually, as well, just reading up about you, that you've been with that same publisher for to this day, I suppose.
Actually, no, the first publisher was just an Irish publisher, and
Okay.
I was with them for the first couple of books, but they really only published in Ireland.
Okay.
So then I went to a publisher that published outside Ireland as well, and that had distribution outside Ireland, and I went with them, and I have been with them pretty much ever since. They now have offices in Ireland. It's Hachette, and they have offices in Ireland and in the UK and in various other places as well.
Okay. So after then I suppose the first couple of books, I suppose then what was the kind of point that you then had to make this decision that you were going to transition, I suppose, full time? Because I'm sure there was a period, and I know you do talk about the fact that it's great to sell books in Ireland and there's great readers, but also to really, have to be able to financially, I suppose, live. It is important to kind of look at that global market and outside of Ireland, which obviously you've successfully done. So was that, I suppose, in place before you made the move out of the banking sector, or did you again just kind of take a chance on that happening?
A bit of both, because the new, like with the first publisher, the one that said, we might be interested if you wrote a book and everything. I mean, they didn't pay me anything. They didn't pay in advance, or they didn't pay, so I couldn't afford to leave my
Yeah.
job. You know, I had mortgage, I had all the things that people had.
Yeah.
So I could, you know, so after the third book, then Hachette came in and said that they would pay me in advance. Now, it wasn't a huge advance, but they would pay me in advance. And I was actually working on something very particular at the time, not book related. And I kind of thought, I really need to finish off what I'm doing here. And when I do that, then maybe I'll be able to give it up. And so I knew that I did have an advance, so I was able to give it up, and I reckoned that I'd be able to not work for about a year. And if the books didn't sell, then I probably had about a year or 18 months. And if the books didn't sell, well, then I would rethink my
But that was great to have, I suppose, that gap where, you know, in a year is a good time to see, you know, give you a proper go and, you know,
but I
fully.
think the thing about working, and certainly when I was writing the first books, and again, you know, when I did write my first book, when Dreaming of a Stranger was written, it was another nearly 2 years before it actually ended up being published. And I don't think anybody nowadays would wait 2 years, and the publishing industry wouldn't wait 2 years, but back then you did. So I mean, I had this big long gap where the book wasn't published anyway, you know, and so for me nothing had changed. You know, the book was there, and they were going to publish it, but nothing had changed. But I just kept on writing away, and in the same ways I had been, you know. And I think it was kind of good for me in some respects, because I could just write with no real pressure, you know. I mean, if the book didn't sell, the book didn't sell, and that would be it. But I didn't kind of go around saying to everybody, oh, my book is going to be published in 2 years, because who would have cared? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so far off. You know, it is amazing that it's that length, or it was that length anyway. And I suppose, so what do you think now, you know, from where you are today, if you looked back to that point when you made that decision, where I suppose you kind of, you had the advance, but you equally had to kind of back yourself, and you had to face the fact that, you know, maybe after a year, if it didn't work out, you would go back, you know. And I suppose, what do you think now, looking back to where you are? I mean, 10 million copies sold, you know, all those countries, all those bestsellers. I think you're at 30. Like, it's just phenomenal. Like, really is. So what do you even, like, how can you even like look back on that and think, wow, that, you know, could you have ever imagined that was going to be your path?
No, I didn't. I mean, I had kind of said to myself, if I write another 2 books or 3 books, maybe I will be happy. And obviously at that stage as well, you know, I was thinking to myself, well, I'll write another 2 or 3 books. I'll still have to go back to work then at some point, because I'm certainly not going to make enough money for that to be my career of choice, you know. And I guess I actually feel that I was really lucky, you know. I mean, Hachette were a great publisher for me, and still are a great publisher for me, and they were very supportive. And you know, a lot of times now you hear that publishers want instant bestsellers, and you know, they don't nurture careers and everything. But they, even though they wanted me to write for them, they also, you know, were thoughtful about my career as well, you know. And they said, and they did say, we think you have more in you than, because I had said to them that the first contract we signed, you know, I said, well, I don't know whether we'll be able to do this again. And they said, we think you have another book in you, you know, and we're happy to back you for that. So I think there's a great, if you get the right publisher and the right editor, and I was really lucky that I did, it can be a very collaborative experience. And you do feel that, you know, whilst you know that for them it's about a business, and it's about, you know, making money for themselves, at the same time they also are kind to you and look after you well. And I know that not everybody has that experience. And so and you know, certainly with the Irish publisher, it was a more difficult experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because they basically were, you write the book, and then they were more interested in what money they would make out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really difficult, I think, when you're a creative person, you don't want to have the conversations about money and things like
Yeah.
that. You really don't. Your only conversation that you want to have is about the book.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you do have to think about the practical side of things as well.
No, definitely. Yeah, no, that's amazing. You've had such a long lasting relationship, and it's obviously been mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
And they have, a phenomenal reputation, obviously, not just in Ireland, but worldwide. And can I ask then, was there a particular moment, or was there a particular thing that ever happened, whether it was a lucky break or a point in time when your career kind of accelerated, or you kind of thought to yourself, oh, wow, like, this is really happening, like on a big scale,
I suppose I can't really pinpoint an exact time, but I know, after that first book that I did for them, and then I did a second book, I think for the third book, I made a lot more money.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a kind of an acceleration, I suppose. But it wasn't a moment, where I went, oh my God, I'm making a book. But at that point, I got an agent, and I would actually, if you're going to go down that route of wanting to be traditionally published and everything, I do think an agent is actually really good, because again, it takes you away from all the business side of it, and you can concentrate on the creative side of it. And I actually think that's really important as a writer, is to be able to concentrate on the creative side of it. And so my agent said to me, well, they want you to write another 2 books, and they will pay you this advance up front. And I kind of went, oh my God. And she said, well, but look, your books have sold, they're selling loads, and they're prepared to make the bet on you. So instead of me making the bet on myself,
Yeah.
they were making the bet on me. And so yeah, that I suppose was, and I think that would have been after, but that would have been after about 6 books, actually, when I think about it.
About 6. So it's it is a long time.
Yeah.
Doing, I suppose it is something you love, but there's still a significant amount of work that goes into it, and I suppose graft to get to that stage. And then obviously, things do have to align, where someone comes along and has that belief in you as well, and wants to back you. But that's great. So then can I ask you, Sheila, I suppose we could talk about a little bit about maybe some highs and some lows, maybe throughout your career, that you might want to share with others.
Do you know, I kind of am not a very highs and lows person.
Okay.
I know that's a bit, for me, the most important thing is writing the book,
Yeah.
and making it a good book, and being happy with it myself.
Yeah.
And that is just really the high for me, is knowing that I've produced the best book I could produce at any particular time. I suppose, like, if you talk about lows, it would be if one book doesn't sell as well as another book, or something like that. But I just feel lucky that all the books that I've written have sold reasonably well. I mean, some have sold better than others, and who knows why that is. And I do think it's kind of harder now to what am I going to say? I think there's a few brand names that are very brand, and get a lot of shelf space all the time. And I know people would say, "Oh, you're a brand name," but that I think you get celebrity brands now. Do you know what I mean?
You do. Yeah.
Celebrity writes a book or whatever, and you just kind of go, oh, and if they're out at the same time as you, you just go, oh God, really? Because I know it became a bit of a thing. It was like you did the whatever you were, whatever your celebrity status was. Maybe you're a singer, and then you do a perfume, and you do a clothesline, you wrote a book, and all those kinds of things. And if you were just unlucky that your book was out at the same time as this book was out, you just really. So things like that happen, and again, obviously that's a thing in terms of sales, but it's also a thing in terms of your personal creativity where you're going, oh gosh, that person didn't even write that book, you know.
Yeah.
So
Of course.
but those
Yeah.
are but the lows for me are more creative lows
Okay.
than anything like, you know, than anything business lows.
And what would that be like?
Well, actually, it was quite hard. I mean, I have to say the pandemic was quite difficult, certainly at the in the initial stages when we were very locked down,
Mm,
and then again in this January when we were very locked down, because I realized that as a writer, my inspiration comes from being outside
okay.
and seeing people and observing people,
Mm,
and when you're kind of stuck inside, and when your walk is like 5 kilometers and everybody's walking with their heads down and they've got masks on, and you can't
mm,
sit in a cafe and watch people and do all those things.
mm.
That's very, very stultifying, I guess. And you know,
Yeah.
and it was even more annoying because people kept saying things like, "Oh, you must love this because no, you know, you're at home," and everybody thinks that writers want to be locked away, and now you are. You know, and I'm going, well, yeah, it's at your choice, though, you know.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
I just found it. I just found it more difficult than I ever expected.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's interesting. As in your inspiration doesn't come from your laptop. Your inspiration comes from being out and meeting and even travel. I'm sure, because I know you
Oh,
traveled for some of your
absolutely.
books.
Yeah. Well, the one that came out, and actually, I suppose that was a kind of a really difficult business time as well, because my previous book, The Women Who Ran Away, came out, you know, in the middle of the whole pandemic thing, and nobody was going anywhere, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and all the bookshops were closed. So actually, you know, if we look at difficult times on the business side of it, it would have been because, you know, my all the bookshops were closed. The books are sitting there, and I remember at one point, a big crate of books were stuck in some warehouse somewhere, and
Yeah.
they couldn't be released. And you're just thinking, all that hard work, and not just my hard work, but the hard work of the people in the publishing house, and the books
Mm,
are sitting in a pallet somewhere. It's just really was really depressing, you know.
yeah, of
Um,
course. Yeah, and
so
no one could plan for that, or sort of no one could have seen that coming. And then it's too late because the books are ready to go, but no one's ready to buy them as such.
yeah.
And there is such a thing of people go into bookstores to buy books. Like the online, it is growing, and I think it has grown more, but I'm
Took
sure.
a while for the online, and the online gets pushed, I think, by book clubs and things like that. But at the same time, you know, people wandering into bookshops, and like I did it myself this week. I for the first time in ages, I went into town and I went into a bookshop, and I just bought 3 random books,
Mhm.
you know, because I could see them there, and I said, "Oh, I'll buy these." I went online. You nearly have to know what you want to buy.
You
You
do,
know, you have to
yeah, yeah. It's so
browse.
true.
You know, you can't pick up, and I'm sure everybody who writes is the same. As you go into a bookshop and you pick up a book, and it's a combination of things. It's the weight of it, it's the feel of it, it's the
Mhm.
story,
Yeah,
everything.
it's the
And
cover.
yeah,
Yeah.
you just don't get that online.
Your front cover is absolutely beautiful, actually, of your latest book.
Yeah, I
Um,
like it myself, I have to say.
Beautiful, yeah. The colors, it's so eye-catching. Yeah. I don't know. Do you get involved in the cover or the
To a certain
colors?
extent, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, to a certain extent, I do. The obviously the publisher um, has a design department, and they come up with designs for the
Hmm.
covers, and they send you designs, and sometimes they'll send a design, and you know, I just kind of go, you know, I'm not really feeling it for this, and or maybe I kind of think the colors should be slightly different or whatever, and they would always take what I have to say on board, which is great. But with this
Yeah.
one, I really liked it straight away myself. I
Mm.
loved the colors. I thought they were really bright and cheerful and
Yeah.
hopeful sort of colors.
Hopeful. Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's fabulous. Well done on that. So if we could go on to then a question around advice for other authors, if you had any, especially those maybe starting out. or those that have kind of done one book and they're wondering what next. Would you have any advice for some of our authors maybe that are watching this today?
Well, I think first of all, if you're writing, if you want to write, you have to write. Do you know what I mean? In terms of writing, if you've no experience, I'm not sure with your authors how experienced they are already at writing.
Probably a lot of us are kind of our first going on to our second book. So
Yeah.
not really experienced.
Well, I mean, I think first of all, anybody who's on their first going on to their second book is vastly more experienced than somebody who hasn't written anything at all. Because I mean, one of the key things and where a lot of prospective authors fall down is not managing to finish that first book and writing the first chapter about 7 million times, but actually never going on to chapter 2. And I mean, that was something I did. I wrote loads and loads of chapter 1s, but I never wrote chapter 2. So, I mean, I think anybody who has actually finished a book should be really proud and pleased with themselves, to say, I have accomplished that much, because for me, that was a big accomplishment as well, like getting from the beginning to the end. So, I mean, you have already, if you've done that, you've already actually proved to yourself that you can do it. And the rest of it, you know what, honest to God, it's just practice. It's like anything. And the more you write, the better you get at writing. And so, I mean, all of us would love to be able to think that there was an easy way to write a book, that there was some magic formula to write a book, but there truly, truly isn't. And you have discovered that if you've written the first book, that you have to start at the beginning and you have to keep going until you get to the end. And different people, I suppose, have different approaches to it. And some people, write in a linear fashion from chapter 1 to chapter 21 or whatever it may be, and progress the whole way through. And other people find it easier to write their big scenes and then fill in the gaps. I'm a bit more linear. I prefer to go in a progressive way, also because I'm never really sure where the book is going. If I write a big scene, and in fact, in one of my early books, I had a great scene in mind, but by the time I got that far in the book, it would never have happened. The characters had changed too much and developed too much. I think what you have to think about is the book that you write has to be the book that you want to write. And I think that's important, because sometimes maybe people get caught up with thinking, crime is very popular, or a particular type of crime is very popular, or a particular type of romance is very popular, or a particular whatever is, popular. But of course, that won't be the case forever. And you have to write the book. You're going to be the one spending, 6 months, 9 months, a year writing your book. And you have to want to spend all that time with the characters. But if you're writing something that you don't believe in yourself, then you're just wasting your time. It's going to be a miserable time, because it's hard work anyway, even when you're enjoying yourself. If you're not enjoying it, and if you're not enjoying the story, and if you hate your characters, then this is just going to be a horrible, horrible time for you. So it's really important to write the book that matters to you and the book that you want to write. And
that's such good advice. Yeah, it's almost like another relationship in your life for 9 months or 12 months. And
well, it really is. Yeah. I mean, all the characters in my books, they're in your head the whole time, as I'm sure you know yourself. So they're closer to you than your family. They are the closest people to you. If you don't want to be with them, then
then it's dysfunctional.
What are you doing it for? And maybe that's where you're saying, oh, I'm just doing it to get published. But you want to be published because you have written something that you're proud of and that you think is worth being published. I don't know that you will really feel that way if you concentrate on the wrong book. So that is actually my
that's brilliant.
Advice. It's because you are creative as a writer. You're a creative person, and the creativity is really the most important part of it.
Yeah, and then almost if you get that right, everything else kind of flows or goes into place.
Yeah, it really does, because people will see the enthusiasm and the joy and whatever you're bringing to the book
Mm-hmm.
yourself. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's also important. And again, if anybody's writing, they're writing because they enjoy reading, and they enjoy books. But I do think it's interesting to read other people's books and say, what about this book did I enjoy? What did I think was good? Do I get the enthusiasm of the writer coming through?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, years ago, a person I know asked me to read a manuscript, and I don't do that very often because I don't really like reading stuff at an early stage from people, because you do need to go over it a lot. But anyway, I read this manuscript, and it was a thriller, so it is not obviously the sort of book that I'm writing. But as I read it, I kind of felt it was just kind of hitting particular points all the time. It didn't really flow for me. And I was talking to this person afterwards, and I said, how did you construct the book? And they said to me, I used an Excel spreadsheet. That's exactly what it reads like.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
wow.
so
It was like departmentalized
yeah, absolutely.
in
And it's kind
boxes.
of like, I'm going to write a thriller, and I want to have this happen and this happen and this.
Mm,
Actually, I think it's really difficult to write a book and say, I want this happen and this happen and this happen, because if you are really involved with your book and your characters, they will always do something that means something is not going to happen, or it will
mm-hmm,
go in a different way, or they should inspire you to take it maybe in a different way. And you have to be open to that happening. And
mm-hmm,
if you're too rigid with your approach, then that won't happen,
mm-hmm.
and the book loses out, I think, as a result.
Yeah, it's great advice. It's like any relationship, it can be unpredictable and it
Mhm.
can go a different direction, and you have to be, I suppose, open to that and
Yeah,
not go into it saying, well, I want to have, this by this age and this has to happen because, and that
you're
just,
gonna be disappointed.
yeah.
Yeah.
So no, that's fantastic. I haven't heard that perspective before, and I always love new perspective for things, especially for authors, as I said, kind of starting out or in the early stages. It's good to hear from someone with such an amazing and long lasting career. So thanks for sharing that with us. I suppose the other thing then I wanted to ask you about was just a little bit about your life outside writing, because I was reading up, again, quite impressive that you're involved, in badminton, the sports council. You are involved with helping women through the Women's Fund, and you're also involved in Roddy Doyle's creative writing. So maybe if you wanted to just maybe tell us a little bit about any of that stuff outside of your writing that you're working with.
Yeah, well, on the badminton and the sports side of things, I've actually always enjoyed sports. I enjoy watching sport, and I enjoy playing sport, although the sports I play are nearly always are racket sports. And I've been involved in badminton since my early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
I actually do believe, if you're doing something that's very much about sitting down and in front of your computer, that you need to do something that's also about moving and being outside. And I find for sure, when I'm struggling with writing, if I go out and I play a game badminton or a game tennis or paddle or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
that actually when I come back, I'm quite energized and refreshed after. So I think it's important. I think sport generally is important for people's health, and so that's why I got involved. I got involved in badminton. I got involved in the running of it because I had, working in banking and everything. I had the admin skills,
Yeah.
and then obviously I had some connections with the sports council through badminton, having to be in touch with them, and they asked me would I be a director there, and so I served for 5 years there, and then they asked me if I would stay on one of their advisory councils, which I still do.
Brilliant.
And in terms of, I've kind of always been interested in women in business, and women in business, but I have to say women generally, and women supporting women generally, because I think one of the things that I found when I was working in finance first, and obviously things have changed to some extent, but not enough, I don't think. There were really very few women in senior positions.
Mm-hmm.
And it meant that there were no role models for us to look up to. All our senior management were male. Um, you kind of said, well, I would like to be working in this area, but there was no women working in it.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, at the time that I was working in banking, for up to quite recently before I joined, women had to leave when they got married anyway. So the few women that were there who hadn't left, were older and unmarried, and everybody was kind of looking and going, you know, such
Mm-hmm.
losers.
Yeah.
Which is the attitude that people had back,
Terrible.
in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
80s.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, well, she couldn't find anybody to marry her. It was just really appalling and
Yeah. Yeah.
unbelievable that
So
people
she had to
thought
marry
like
her
that.
job almost.
Oh gosh, very much so. And,
Yeah.
and I think now those women were probably having great lives. Do you know what I mean? I know
I
one
know.
of them had a sports car. So I kind of think she must have had a great life that none of us really knew anything about. But since then, and when I moved into finance, and I realized that there were so few women
Mm-hmm.
involved in business, and that they weren't really getting pushed ahead. I did feel it was really important to help women
Mm-hmm.
realize their own potential, and I have done it initially through the community fund. I'm not actually involved with them now anymore, but simply because some of their funding changed and how they were operating that changed. But I still have been involved in giving some talks to women in business, and again
Brilliant.
helping women prepare for interviews and things like that, which we are not confident enough about yet. We're not aggressive enough about
Mm-hmm.
yet,
Yeah.
I think. Um,
Wow.
all that stuff, when women are aggressive and they're shrill and stuff, and guys are just assertive. And so trying
Mm-hmm.
to kind of put a framework around that, I think, is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the Roddy Doyle side of things, well, obviously, I love writing. As a child, I loved writing my own stories, and the initial thing with them, with Fighting Words, was to help young children to unlock that creativity, because sometimes they're very shy about it. And I've been involved with them as a director for 9 years, and it's just the most amazing
Wow.
place. I've done work. I've mainly worked with the older children and some of our other projects, and it's just great. It's just great for people to come to a place where it's all about being creative and all about expressing yourself.
That's incredible. Yeah, no, I loved that. Really struck me when I was reading up about you, how generous you are with your time to others and for others. And, you're really using your own kind of passion to, to put back to people, other people. Even though I'm sure it's extremely busy, with your own career, that you have those
You know what?
causes.
I mean, a career. I know I have worked hard, and I do work hard. I accept that, but at the same time, I've also been lucky,
Mhm.
and a lot of it as well is just saying to people, these things are possible. Because
Yeah.
sometimes you do feel, oh God, I'll never make it. I'll never do this. I'll never do that. But you know, routes for everybody are different, and sometimes people think there's only one way of getting to this point or that point or the other point, and there are lots of different ways of doing things. And I do like to encourage people, and I especially on the creative side of things. So I
Mm.
kind of look at sport as being creative as well.
Yeah, no, it is. Well, it's a lovely range of kind of hobbies you have there. That are all kind of, creative in their own ways. And I suppose they all kind of indirectly support what they all kind of maybe support your own writing and maybe some of your own inspiration. But no, I loved because I was reading obviously up about your recent book, and strong female character, and exactly like that, not married, but happy to be not married. And you're really kind of showcasing that. And that kind of, that feeds into then, your own kind of, like, as you were talking there about, women in the workforce. And, I suppose it's sort of like seeing your own passion come through these books to send out these empowering messages about women, that you can be okay and not be married. You can still have a happy life.
Well, of course. And, there's no one right road towards happiness. We all find it in different places. But I guess I'm glad you thought that all that came through in the book, because it is important to me that whatever book I'm writing, whatever story I'm telling, the passion that I would feel for the subject, and that comes back to what I was saying earlier on about writing something that matters to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then it does come through, and so that's good. And that story, Delphi's story in Three Weddings and a Proposal, I mean, it did matter to me that because you so often you are pushed this narrative of women kind of being on the edge all the time, about to open a bottle of wine because their lives are so shit or something. And they're not at all.
Mm-hmm.
We're all busy, there's no doubt about that, but everybody has good things going on as well, and you have to be able to, and women have to be able to focus on the things that matter to them, and not always the things that matter to the people around them, which is what Delphi does, or tries.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah, no, it's so it's so well written. You're super talented. You're super generous with your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. I just know that our authors watching this, and just anyone in general, will get something out of our conversation, and that's what it's all about. Because I really wanted to kind of hear from people who have had their successes and see what information they might share with us, and you've done that really generously today. So Sheila, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today, and best of luck with everything. The next 30 books.
I don't think we're going to go that far, but you're very welcome. It was my pleasure to talk to you, and best of luck to everybody out there who's writing, and hopefully you will be pushing me off the shelves.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Sheila.